Good evening, YouTube. This is Los Angeles Prepper with another tripod adjusting video. So, was watching one of the people I'm subscribed to, Prepper Bob. Give him a quick shout out because he's a cool guy and he's always making good videos. And he was talking about prescription drug use. In particular, he was talking about a comment that he had heard or read, or someone responded to him about addicts acting unpredictably and in perhaps nefarious ways, when shit hits the fan. So I'm going to take that idea and expand it a little bit. Um, so let's talk about types of addicts. And before I begin, maybe I'll talk about what it means to be an addict. An addict doesn't mean, like you like donuts, so once a week you get a donut. That's kind of a behavior and it's a pattern and it's something you like to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're addicted to donuts. Um, and also, something to keep in mind is that just because someone has an addictive personality doesn't mean they're going to be addicted to any vice, prescription or otherwise. So just some things to keep in mind. A lot of people sort of think that all addicts are just addicted to all sorts of things or have to be addicted to something, but depending on the individual, there's a lot of variation between people who are highly addictive and kind of just get addicted to everything, and there's a spectrum, there's a range. So when I use the word addict, I'm taking into account that there's a range of addicts. It's not just, oh, you're an addict and that means X. So we have legal addicts. We have legal drug addicts in this country, and they get a lot of different treatment than the illegal addicts. And I'm not going to make this too political of a video, but I just think that it's worth a thought. It's worth a thought, how you feel about it and what that means. So on the legal side, we have prescription drugs, alcohol, nicotine, caffeine. Um, I guess you could put some like bodybuilder stuff like HGH or, steroids and other stuff on there too. Um, and, alcohol is the big obvious one. Cigarettes, everyone knows that people get addicted to cigarettes pretty easily, but they also know that nicotine is a really addictive drug. So, people on the low addiction level might have an easier time getting hooked on nicotine because nicotine has sort of been scientifically shown to kind of make you want to keep coming back. Alcohol, of course, alcoholism is not something new. It's sort of generally downplayed by modern media. It's always like, oh, let's go out and, all the sitcoms and stuff, they go out and have fun and get drunk and then they get hungover and then they laugh about how hungover they are. And, they, even if sitcoms kind of here and there or like mainstream media touches a little bit on kind of the negative effects of alcoholism, I think generally it's still um, society is still pretty accepting of people that drink and even maybe have problems with drinking unless they get to the point where they're getting DUIs or beating their spouse or something like that. But if they're just drunk a lot or they like drinking all the time, if they're working and paying their bills, society kind of gives them a pass, I feel like. um, Nicotine addicts, I mean, people look at them like, kind of making bad health choices but not so much necessarily affecting other people. Caffeine addicts, most people don't really think about caffeine as a drug, although it certainly is a drug. And, I don't know about you, but I definitely enjoy a cup of coffee or two in the morning. Saw my parents do it growing up. I never thought I would get into it. I thought coffee was gross. And then my friend got a job at Starbucks, and I don't know. I don't know if that helped. But I enjoy a cup of coffee or two. I definitely don't need it to like get energy to wake me up or anything, but um, just to kind of, I don't know, I guess just to kind of lift the grogginess. The same reason that we all like a cup of coffee in the morning, because we're all a little bit addicts, I guess, if you're drinking coffee every morning. Um, So how are these, and I'll talk about the different types of addicts, then I'll get into like what I think is going to happen with them. Of course, aside from legal types of drugs, we have illegal types of drugs. And I'll just sort of say, I'll sort of include federally illegal drugs. There are certainly some laws in different states regarding one drug in particular that's been classified by some states as medicinal. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. But things like methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, crack, and to be honest, the amount of illegal drugs that there are out there now, I probably even haven't heard of. Like everyone's heard of meth and heroin and coke and crack, but there's just criminals and scientists and criminal scientists, and I don't know, whoever invents new drugs. Um, there's just a lot of crazy shit out there. There's a lot of crazy shit, and I don't really need to go into it, but yeah, there's a lot of types of illegal drugs out there, and a lot of them can be really addictive. Meth and heroin definitely super high on the addictive scale. Cocaine, a little bit. Crack is sort of considered, I think, generally to be a lot more addictive than cocaine. Um, and then beyond drugs, there are other non-vice types of addicts. You could be behavioral. Addiction can play into a lot of different areas of your life. Like if you're addicted to your cell phone, I was talking about zombies in one of my other videos, cell phone zombies. You could be addicted to the computer, addicted to cell phones, you know, addicted to video games, anything really. That's kind of, humans are very um, pattern oriented beings. We like to do things over and over again. And the more you do something, the better you get at it. So now that I've talked about a few different types of addicts and a few different activities that addicts might participate in, what's going to happen when the shit hits the fan? When you can't get any more booze, or at least booze is really expensive. Running out of smokes, you might have a little bit of coffee, but you run out eventually. No more meth, no more heroin, coke, crack. I mean, it's not like all the poppy plants are going to vanish overnight, but without ships and airplanes and power and stuff like that, it's kind of hard to get that stuff from, like Afghanistan or halfway across the world or wherever from where it is. Ironically, meth would probably have the best chance of remaining. Meth and alcohol, but like meth is a lot easier to make than alcohol. I mean, alcohol, you need kind of a lot of shit going on. It's about sort of comparative. Nicotine, I mean, you got to grow a whole tobacco plant. Coffee, you got to have a whole cocoa plant. Heroin, I don't know how you make heroin, to be honest. Coke and crack, I know, are from the cacao leaves too. So I mean, unless you have a bunch of like unprocessed coke, I don't know how that's gonna arrive from Colombia or whatever. But how are addicts gonna act when they can't get their fix? Well, they're probably gonna go into withdrawal. If you don't know what withdrawal is, it's when the physical effects and the mental effects, psychological effects of whatever drug that you're kind of habitually on start to wear off. And they can last for hours, days, maybe a couple weeks to varying degrees depending on your drug use. But are is going, typically when addicts, if they're able to keep their fix going, when they start getting withdrawal, they'll just go fix again. So they sort of like are always avoiding withdrawal. But if they have to go through withdrawal simply because they just don't have any drugs, there's just no way to buy drugs, their guy in the corner or whatever. The supply chain, that currently keeps all the gears of society working, when it stops, everything stops. Not just Walmart, not just Target, not just the gas station, not just Big Five, everything. Like everything. If it was, worldwide event. Otherwise it's just you have Hurricane Harvey and, it's that area, or Hurricane Irma, and it's just that area. So do I think addicts are gonna start going crazy and robbing people for $100 so they can buy the last cup of coffee? Or the last, Coke, the last crack hit or Coke, you know, brick of coke or whatever. I mean, it's all you're always gonna have a distribution. You know, you're always gonna have a range. So I would suspect that while there's probably a large number of addicts that might go a little out of their way to get a fix, like an addict might barter some shit that's valuable just to get a pack of cigarettes. Like they might even barter their last food if it get them a pack of cigarettes if they really wanted it. Would that start getting into an addict that was in a family bartering stuff that their family needed to get a fix? It's potential. People do it before shit hits the fan with money. Um, so I think there's going to be a small percentage that just kind of gets through it and quits, or through no choice of their own, and for better or worse, just kind of moves on with their life and just lets it go. There'll be kind of a group in the middle that might go a little bit extra out of their way to try to, get together with their friend and start making meth in their backyard. And, unless they know what they're doing, I guarantee if you start trying to make meth or heroin or coke or something, you're probably going to fail and you're probably going to give up. You're not going to like Google recipes on the internet. I mean, if you know how to do it, you do. And if you don't, you're probably not going to learn it and shit hits the fan unless you have a really good book or something. Nicotine's kind of an outlier in that because you just have to grow the tobacco plant. Alcohol, it kind of requires like a still and stuff. But are all alcoholics? I mean, this is the question. How many alcoholics, what percentage of alcoholics are going to try to make their own alcohol? Probably not a lot. What percentage of alcoholics make their own alcohol now? And it's easy to buy a still. Almost none. It's a lot easier to go to the store. And to kind of play on that line, how many alcoholics, when they run out of money, are going to go rob someone so they can buy a bottle of vodka? Maybe some of them, but probably not most of them. And then this gets into like, the prescription drugs and some of the harder stuff. I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that just because someone's on a harder drug or they've been using it for longer, or this drug affects their brain in this way or that way, doesn't necessarily, I don't think that really gives you any causation. There might, or correlation rather, to start getting all crazy and killing people. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so addicts doing crazy shit on drugs, you know, people doing crazy shit on drugs is highly correlated to people doing crazy stuff happens to be highly correlated to people being really freaking high on drugs. Because when people get high on drugs, they go out in public and they do, weird shit. Or if they're not in public, they're doing weird stuff. And it's likely that, if they're doing something illegal or drawing attention to themselves, um, that they could get some negative attention. But does that mean that a bunch of people that used to use drugs, legal or otherwise, whether or not they were addicted or they just used them a lot, however you want to categorize it, is there a causation to think that when all of them go into withdrawal, that they're going to start raping and pillaging for their fix? I do believe when people get more desperate, they will kind of reach out and cross boundaries, lines in the sand, and get a little crazier. Everyone's going to kind of adjust if we have to adjust to whatever the situation is. And there certainly will be a percentage of people that just go apeshit crazy for their coke or their heroin or even their cigarettes or their alcohol or whatever. Who knows? Um, I don't think it's important to really get bogged down in like, well, meth addicts are going to do this and coke addicts are going to do that. If someone was really dependent physically or emotionally, or psychologically on a drug or multiple drugs, um, it's going to be harder for them, to cope with that. Are they going to turn to acting out and harming other people? I think it really depends on the person. I mean, it just depends on so many things. It's really going to be a case by case. Maybe if you I mean, now, before shit hits the fan, there's certainly a lot of crime correlated to people on drugs, people stealing things for drugs. You know, like if you're in a neighborhood that has, and I've lived in neighborhoods like this where car windows are getting broken every weekend, it's not because the criminals are starting a stereo company. It's because they're high or they're trying to get high and they just want to like steal whatever they can find and hope that they can just sell it for $5 or $10 or whatever. You know, they're not making good business decisions when they're just breaking into your car to steal whatever they can find in your back seat. So that's kind of the thing that like presently, I'm sure there are some drug addicts that, commit armed robberies and things like that, but that's kind of a much lower incidence, I think. So, in conclusion, do I think addicts are going to start to get crazy when shit hits the fan and they can't get their drugs? Maybe a minority, possibly, but I think the majority of them might get a little funny, but are probably just going to end up having to deal with it, even if they try a little bit to try to get a drug here or there. And, a minority is just going to kind of let it go. So, love to know what you think about how addicts going to act in the apocalypse. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.